My name is Yair Davidiy. I represent Bid'am movement of the 10 tribes of Israel. We are continuing a discussion that identifies the USA with Manasseh. Manasseh was the son of Joseph. This is the third talk in this series. It is the final talk, and we are summarizing the 7 main points that we have gone through. There are other points of evidence that identify the USA with Manasseh, but we have concentrated on the main ones heretofore. Manasseh was the son of Joseph. Manasseh and Ephraim were the two sons of Joseph. They were born to him from Osanath, the daughter of the priest of On in Egypt. Joseph was the son of Jacob. Jacob is also known as Israel. To Esau were born 12 sons. Esau had 12 sons. And these sons became the forefathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Jacob blessed Joseph that his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, should also be tribes in their own right. And therefore, technically, we have 13 tribes, but since Ephraim and Manasseh are two separate tribes, but the Bible always maintains a quorum of 12 tribes, sometimes by including Ephraim and Manasseh as the one tribe of Joseph, or at other times when they count Ephraim and Manasseh as separate tribes, they exclude for different reasons one or other of the other tribes. So Ephraim and Manasseh were the two separate tribes. Manasseh was the firstborn. He was elder than Ephraim, but nevertheless in the blessing to Jacob, Jacob gave preeminence to Ephraim. We say that even so, the USA is Manasseh. Manasseh came to dominate the USA, and we are not saying that the majority of the USA pertains to Manasseh. We are saying that the 10 tribes in general, are to be found in the USA as well as amongst Western peoples. What happened in ancient times, there were 12 tribes, as we said. The 12 tribes split into two separate kingdoms after the death of King Solomon. A few hundred years later, the northern kingdom, of the majority of the Israelite tribes, were conquered by the Assyrians. They were taken into captivity to different portions of the Assyrian Empire. They lost their identity, but nevertheless retained some degree of ethnic cohesion. And even though they split up into different groups, in stages, the different groups all migrated to the west, and in many cases recoalesced, rejoined up unto each other, and we can identify them through archaeology, through different characteristics, and even through different names that are similar to the tribal names of clans of Manasseh and Ephraim, and we can also identify them with other Israelite tribes. So with the main point, the main point perhaps, or one of the major points, the first point that we spoke about was tribal demography. We have shown that there were different tribes in the British Isles. There were a lot of different tribes in the British Isles, in so-called Celtic timers. In ancient Britain there were numerous tribes, and each one of these tribes had their own tribal name that are recorded in legends and also in Roman and Greek reports, and also in place names, and many of these names are similar to those of Israelite tribes. In the British Isles, by the British Isles we mean the areas of Ireland, Ulster, Scotland, England, Wales, everything that is encompassed in the Isles of Britain. All of that area was populated by groups from all of the tribes of Israel. All of the tribes of Israel were to be found in that region, as well as being found in areas of Western Europe. Even so, on the whole, the British Isles were dominated by peoples descended from the tribes of Joseph, from both Ephraim and Manasseh. In general, we can say that Manasseh was dominant in the north and in the west. And from these areas, the formative elements in the USA emerged. The early immigrants to the USA, to what later became the USA, came from the west and from the north, from regions in which Manasseh was dominant. So that is one reason why we say the USA is dominated by Manasseh. physically, it may be, there are indications to that the majority of Israelites in the USA are from Ephraim. Even so, Manasseh is a dominant area, Manasseh is a dominant influence. Manasseh dominated the USA. The Manasseh found its expression through the USA, whereas Ephraim is more connected with Britain and the British Empire and with offshoots of the British, more direct offshoots such as Australia, New Zealand and so on, and Canada. Of course, Canada is also very important in this, though Canada as well as the USA has some aspects of Manasseh in its structure. That is another point for another talk. Another reason why we identify the USA with Manasseh is the very blessing of Jacob. Jacob blessed the sons of Joseph, as we explained. Jacob, also known as Israel, blessed the sons of Joseph. He blessed Ephraim and Manasseh. Joseph intended that Manasseh, his firstborn, should be blessed first. Therefore he placed Manasseh to his left, and he placed Ephraim to his right. They were facing Jacob, so that the Manasseh, who was on the left-hand side of Joseph, would be facing the right-hand side of Jacob. But Jacob crossed his hands over. He crossed his hands over so that his right hand was on the head of Ephraim, his left hand on the head of Manasseh. Nevertheless, he did not switch the boys around. Their relative positions remained the same. It came out therefore that Jacob had placed his left hand on the head of Manasseh. And in the rabbinical explanations, as we quoted from the Bnei Yisachar, the famous rabbinical commentary, Bnei Yisachar, the left hand represents the weaker element, the weaker and slower element, but the very essence of the blessing was that Manasseh should be great. In some ways, Manasseh should be just as great as Ephraim, if not more so. But Manasseh would be greater at a later date after Ephraim had his heyday. And since we have already found indications that Ephraim is to be dominated in the British Isles in Britain, and Ephraim and Manasseh in the USA, so too historically we find that the British Empire had its heyday. Britain was great. Britain influenced all of the world for a long period of time before the USA reached its peak of greatness, reached its present predominance in world affairs. So that was our second point. Our third point was that the very name Manasseh, derived from the Hebrew root noshe, means responsible representation. Responsible representation, noshe, which gave us the word Manasseh, connotes something from oneself that you have projected elsewhere, but you still retain a connection to, and that responsibility over, or answerable to yourself. For instance, a creditor gives out something of his own, and we gave all different, but the creditor still retains some claim on what he has given, and we gave different examples, forgetting, and when you still retain it in your memorial system. Women who are called Noshim, who are represented by their menfolk in the aggregate, but they still retain their menfolk are still responsible to them and for them, and so on. And so we have the principle of responsible representation. Responsible representation was the principle that gave birth to the USA. The USA rebelled, came to birth when the early colonists, the original 13 colonies, incidentally the original 13 colonies representing the real 13 tribes, the actual 13 tribes of Jacob, of Israel. The 13 colonies rebelled against Britain, even though they themselves, who were mainly, on the whole, overwhelmingly came from Britain. They rebelled against Britain, they fought against their brothers, all over the principle of no taxation without representation. And responsible representation is the very birth. It represents something in the American Constitution, represents the very soul of America. And this is something that we find in the Hebrew meaning of the very word Manasseh. We also find that the firstborn son of Manasseh was called Machir. Machir gave his name to America. Machir in medieval Latin was written as America or Americas, and this name was well known in the certain areas of southern Europe, southwest Europe. And this name, Americas, means Machiri in Hebrew, or belonging to Machir, and America Vespucci received this name, and he was a Latin sailor who proved that the North and South America was separate from Asia, and because of him, due to him, America received its name. So we may say that, and he himself received his name from Machir, the son of Manasseh, indirectly. So we may say that divine Protestants wanted that America should be named after Machir, the firstborn son of Manasseh. Also, the very name Machir, after which America is named, and America is the USA in common talk, and also in the Americans themselves refer to themselves as America, is the accepted name for the USA is America. Machir, from which the word America is derived, means in Hebrew free enterprise, buying and selling, and capitalism is an important principle, a foundational principle of America. America is the foremost capitalist nation, and we can say to some degree capitalism and America and the American civilization are intertwined and inextricable. They are concomitant with each other, and this is not only an observation of ours, this is an observation which you will find anywhere, in almost any work of social history, social political history, and of political philosophy. You'll find this observation. It is an accepted fact. It is anyway. So this was another aspect, another proof, or another indication that America represents Manasseh. America is Manasseh. The sixth principle was Yank, the word Yank, which is accepted internationally as a nickname for an American, even though some people in the south of America may not like it. This is a fact. Yank, whatever its origins, also means Jake or Jacob, and Yankov, it is short for Jacob, and Manasseh was to receive an important input in his personality, in his national personality, directly from Jacob. He remained on the right hand side of Jacob, whereas Ephraim was more to receive his input from his father Joseph. Manasseh received it from their grandfather Jacob, and therefore there is a connection, a strong connection between the concepts of Jacob and Manasseh, and we find this reflected in the nickname for American Yank, which means Jacob. And the seventh point that we pointed to was the presidential system of government, which is also connected to the American Constitution. The American Constitution is very, very important in American thought, in American ethos. Whether or not something is constitutional, it's extremely important to Americans, and it is more important to them than it is to other peoples. Americans are known for the importance they place in their constitution, whether or not something may be considered constitutional. An aspect of this constitutional principle is the presidential system. The presidential system gives power to the president, a power like a king. In some ways, he's a great deal of power. He's a lot of power compared to most European systems of government, but nevertheless his power is circumscribed, it is limited, it is well defined. And R.L. Schlanger, in an important book concerning the different tribal characteristics of the Israelite tribes, pointed out that kings from Manasseh, as distinct from kings from Ephraim or kings from Judah, kings from Manasseh, who ruled over the northern kingdom of Israel. Not all of the kings in the northern kingdom of Israel were from Manasseh. Some were from Manasseh, some were from Ephraim, and some were from other tribes. But R.L. Schlanger managed to divide all of the kings somehow, others pertaining either to Ephraim or Manasseh. And he pointed out, taken as a prime example, Jehu ben Nimshi, who's Nimshi incidentally, as R.L. Schlanger himself pointed out, as a name, Nimshi, which contains the letters of Manasseh, which in Hebrew thought and Hebrew exegesis can be significant, as we find examples in the Bible. Not only it's not something that was invented later by the rabbis, we find examples of this in the Bible. And the kings from Manasseh had this aspect of a president. In other words, they had a lot of power, they were important, but they were appointed for a specific purpose, and their appointment, their being made kings, was usually from the very beginning circumscribed or based on conditional upon their fulfilling certain tasks and a defined role. So these are the 7 different principles by which we are able to determine that the USA is Manasseh. The 7 principles that we spoke about were the tribal demography, that a lot of the early inhabitants, the majority of the early inhabitants of the USA when it became a country, came from areas that were ascribed to Manasseh in the British Isles and also in Western Europe. That Manasseh, according to the blessing of Jacob, was to become great after Ephraim. That the very word Manasseh means responsible representation. The responsible representational system of government gave rise to the coming to being of the USA. Also that the USA is named after Machir, or how Machir belonged to Machir, Machir being the firstborn son of Manasseh, and that the name Machir in Hebrew, from which we derive the word America, has the meaning of free enterprise or of capitalism, or the capitalist principle. Also we have the nickname given to Americans Yank, which is short for Jacob, and until we had the presidential system of government, which was foreshadowed or presaged in a certain sense. It had a prototypical example is to be found in the kings of Manasseh, nation Israel, and the Manasseh apparently continued this tradition, or had an instinctive expression of his inner tribal being, is connected with the presidential system. And we find the presidential system as an important aspect of the American Constitution, which is very important in American national character. Thank you very much. This is Yair Davidiy, speaking to you from Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, and I represent Brit Am, movement of the 10 tribes of Israel. Thank you.